I would like to be born in the future when exploitation and occupation and division and war were things of the past. And when men and women could realize their full potential, wherever they were born, in whatever circumstances. My name is George Galloway. The Arabs entered my bloodstream in Beirut in 1977 and never left. I loved the food, the music, the culture, the etiquette, the way of life. I loved everything about it. I'm not some kind of Orientalist, but I'm with justice and with right, and that places me in the position I'm in. I don't look at life on the basis of countries. My daughter asked me when she was very young, which country are we from? Are we Irish? Are we Scottish? Are we English? I told her our country is the future. And this is how I look at life. I have much more in common with a Tunisian who thinks like me than with a British person who doesn't. Just because I have the same passport as Tony Blair, I have nothing else in common with him, nothing at all. I had a whole pantheon of heroes, from Ho Chi Minh, who was fighting the Americans as I grew up, and that was my first campaigning efforts against the Vietnam War. Che Guevara, he remains a great hero for me. I was lucky enough in my life to become a friend of Fidel Castro, a friend of Che Guevara's daughter, his son. I lived next door to his son in Cuba. I was active in support of Cuba, and in the early 1980s, I met Fidel Castro for the first time. And I'm the author of the Fidel Castro Handbook. Once I did a TV program with him, which lasted from 5 o'clock in the afternoon to midnight. And it only stopped because the cameraman fell off his chair asleep. Or Fidel would have continued. And later I thought no one could possibly watch a TV program that long, but every person in Havana the next day stopped me to say that they'd been watching this program.
actually said that, and literally seconds later, he landed this decent ball in as well, and it was a short corner. They just didn't get out quick enough for Barcelona. It was a time with Jason and myself then. George Galloway's coming up after the news at 10. George, very good evening to you. What you got?
We're talking about child abuse and then followed on by knife crime. And of course, how can we ignore the elephant that's sitting in the corner of the room, the by-election disaster in Norwich, posing a new crisis for the Prime Minister. So lots to talk about, political as well as social. And it's all coming up over the next 3 hours. 08717 223344. There's certainly no other political figure in Britain who faces the public in one way or another in the numbers that I do every week. So I have my finger on the pulse when things are going our way and when things are going against them. I can tell because you can feel it in the airwaves. Welcome to the mother of all talk shows with me, George Galloway. We've got quite a show for you tonight. In fact, it's the mother of all talk shows. I had never visited Iraq before 1993, and I wouldn't have been welcome if I had, because I was a known opponent of the Saddam Hussein regime, opposed their war with Iran. I was, of course, opposed to the crazy idea of invading and occupying Kuwait, but I was against the idea of killing Iraq's children because of a falling out between the Western powers and the president of Iraq, who had previously been their best friend and who had been fueled in his war against Iran. There was mass starvation in Iraq when I arrived there in '93. I heard a woman give birth by cesarean section without anesthetic. I heard the sounds from outside the labor ward. I never heard anything like it in my whole life. And I threw myself into the fight against sanctions. I tried so hard to, first of all, lift the embargo on the basis that an Iraqi child was dying every 6 minutes of every day and night, dying before she even knew she was an Iraqi, but for no other reason than that she was, and that she had the misfortune to be born in Iraq at that time. I set out from London in 1999 to drive a red London bus all the way from Big Ben to Baghdad. It was set up in the name of Mariam Hamza, who was a small child I discovered in the Saddam hospital in Baghdad, just days away from death from leukemia. We brought her to Britain, restored her to health. Her hospital bill was paid for by the now King of Saudi Arabia. I had the responsibility to pay this child's medical bills, and I had no money. And I must say, in fairness to him, he didn't allow me more than 30 seconds to explain the situation. He put up his hand and said, "Consider this hospital bill paid." It was a very noble thing for him to have done. And then we decided to lead this convoy to Baghdad to draw attention to all the other Mariams who were perishing in Iraq. "10 years is long enough. No more sanctions. Let the Iraqi people live." All aboard for Baghdad. Bye. All aboard. when we arrived in Baghdad, 3 million Iraqis came onto the streets to receive this bus. It's the biggest welcome for any British people in any country ever in all history. It was completely unforgettable. I was attacked, of course, at the time and subsequently for doing this. Saddam Hussein was said to have given me millions of pounds. In fact, he never gave me 1 cent. But the newspapers who claimed that he gave me millions of pounds, they, in the end, had to give me millions of pounds, alhamdulillah.
The Oil for Food program is run not from Baghdad, but from the United Nations building in New York. And anyone receiving funds under the Oil for Food deal receives it from the United Nations' own bank account. And so it will be very simple indeed to establish whether a single brass farthing of the Oil for Food money ever came to me or our organization.
We will be using a timing system today, Mr. Galloway. We've got 10 minutes.
I told the US Senate, everything you said about Iraq turned out to be wrong, and everything I said about Iraq turned out to be right. So how dare you sit in front of me? You want to put me on trial? It's me who should be putting you on trial. Senator, in everything I said about Iraq, I turned out to be right and you turned out to be wrong. You are trying to divert attention from the crimes that you supported, from the theft of billions of dollars of Iraq's wealth. Have a look at the real Oil for Food scandal. Have a look at the 14 months you were in charge of Baghdad, the first 14 months, when $8.8 billion of Iraq's wealth went missing on your watch. I never profited by 1 cent, not 1 cent. On the contrary, I gave my life's blood for this cause to try to draw attention to the sanctions which were massacring the children of Iraq. Little did we know that just 4 years later, an even bigger massacre would occur.
I want Americans and all the world to know that coalition forces will make every effort to spare innocent civilians from harm. We have no ambition in Iraq except to remove a threat and restore control of that country to its own people.
I will not apologize for removing Saddam Hussein.
Toppling Baghdad will just be the beginning of years of bloodshed and horror and war.
Britain is a European country, and it's about time it realised it and accepted it and played its full part in Europe. And I would hope that Europe could develop a political weight commensurate with its economic and cultural weight, which is considerable. And if it did, I would hope it would play a better role in the Middle East rather than being the tail of the American dog, which is what the role of the Europeans largely has been. I think that Mr. Blair was and is a kind of crazed evangelical exporter of the neocon, neoliberal method. I once asked him why he was following Bush in such a way. He said that our strategic relationship with the United States allows us to punch above our weight. It's a boxing metaphor, that you can punch harder than your weight would necessarily imply. But in truth, the special relationship was much more like the one that Miss Lewinsky had with President Clinton. It was very undignified, very one-sided. And I could go on, but it's Arab television, so I won't continue the metaphor.
Out! 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 Sunni! Out! Sunni! Out! Sunni! 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 Out! Out! Out!
Respect is the political party which grew out of the anti-war movement. I had been expelled from the Labour Party over things I said on Abu Dhabi television. And so I was in Parliament, sitting as an independent. And I decided with my friends that here we had a mass movement in the country with no political reflection in the Parliament. The Parliament was in a bubble. The people outside, even before they found out what they now know, that it had all been a big lie, the whole Iraq story, they decided that they were being ignored and they needed a political voice. I became the only left of Labour member of Parliament to be elected to the British Parliament in England in 60 years, when I defeated one of the big figures in New Labour at the election in 2005.
I do hereby declare that George Galloway is duly elected a Member of Parliament for Bethnal Green Borough.
Mr. Blair, this is for Iraq. This defeat that you have suffered and all the other defeats that New Labour has suffered this evening is for Iraq. All the people you killed, all the lies you told have come back to haunt you.
Subsequently, we have elected some 20 members of local councils throughout the country, and when the general election comes, we hope to go from one Member of Parliament to 3. 2 in my area of East London and 1 in Birmingham, where we hope to elect the very first Muslim woman Member of Parliament, a hijab-wearing mother of 4 children, who's one of our brightest stars. Her name is Salma Yaqub. Listen out for that name. You'll know more about her in the future.
Ow! Just the way you move. It's a real deal. And the way you groove.
Brilliant, okay.
It's the way I feel it. You're a wild thing and you're a natural star. Got me.
Thanks very much. It says things and covers issues generally that just wouldn't make it onto the mainstream media. And it does so in a popular style. There are other channels who shall be nameless who also cover these kind of things, but as a kind of televisual equivalent of the National Geographic magazine, and that's not very popular in style. The US olive branch to Iran over its nuclear program seems to be dropping its leaves as Hillary Clinton warns that time is running out for Tehran to bow to her overtures. I promise you, this is the real deal. I hope to make a movie soon, a Michael Moore style movie. It's called Occupation of the Sun. I need small money to make this movie, which can play in theatres throughout the United States. But I'm not finding any takers for this. It's been my experience that the Arabs with the money don't know what to do with it. And the Arabs who know what to do with it don't have the money. If we could open radio stations, TV stations, newspapers, build a lobbying effort. Of course, I'm not even asking the Arabs to do what they could do in a minute. If OPEC were to meet and say that they were only going to consider 1973-style reductions in output until, say, the apartheid wall and the international legal judgment was enforced and the wall knocked down, it would be knocked down overnight because the United States and the others would ensure that Israel complied because they couldn't live with that kind of reduction. If Saudi Arabia, which has $3 trillion invested in the American economy and another $3 trillion in American banks, $6 trillion with the American economy on its knees, if they even hinted that until there was justice for the Palestinians, they would withdraw their presence in the United States economy, believe me, it would be changed overnight. I'm not even asking them for this. I gave up asking them for this a long time ago. Just use some of your surplus to change things on the ground in the West. You could do it. I knew that I would make many powerful enemies, and I was ready for that. But what I didn't know was that when the enemies came to get me, that my friends would run away. This has been my experience. The Arab governments, almost without exception, are faithless people. I lost faith in the Arab leaders long ago, but the Arab people, no. Wake up. Wake up. Make your governments change, or change your governments. You can't go on like this. The Arabs could be a superpower in the world. From Marrakesh to Bahrain, 300 million people speaking the same language, worshipping the same God, with the same culture. All that oil, all that gas, all that water, all that land, all those people, all that education, all that culture and history. The Arabs should be one of the major factors in world events. Instead, they are treated with complete contempt. And if the Arabs want to spend another 100 years, like the last 100 years, they will continue to sleep. But if they wake up, they can find that the potential greatness of the Arab world is finally realized.